Welcome, everybody. We're here to talk about consortiums, or modern business networks. We actually had some slides, but evidently those are not going to happen today, so it'll be just a discussion. I'm going to start by just all introducing ourselves. I was curious before we start, just to help us guide our conversation, how many of you in the audience are actually working on a blockchain project today? Okay. And how many are doing that in a multi-party type setting? Okay, great. Guess, well, we'll use the term consortium in some situations. It's really interchangeable with a shared business network. It's the type of consortium that's business entities doing work together. I know there's other types that are more about, regulatory or sort of advisory. And so those, just to clarify a little bit around the terminology, I think we thought this would be just a fun term, but want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So I guess I'll start with myself. So, Sophia Lopez, I'm a founder of Kaleido, which is the blockchain business cloud. It's part of the ConsenSys family of projects, which you might have heard the term spokes to refer to that. We've been in the market for over a year, and you'll hear more about what we're up to during the course of the conversation. And Pri?
Hi everyone, I'm Priyanka Desai. I lead business development and operations for OpenLaw, which is a spoke of ConsenSys, and we are aiming to streamline legal operations.
Hi, I'm Phil Kelly. I'm the National Director of Business Development here in the US. I work for the Solutions team. Solutions team, as you may know, is a full-service services organization. We offer everything from business advisory and strategy help to product design and engineering and post-implementation support.
Good morning, Emmanuel Marshall. I'm based in London and working in ConsenSys solution and looking after global business development. I also get involved in some of the large consortiums and industry blockchain projects, which we're going to talk about.
Yep. Thanks everyone for being here. So I think just to start, I guess some observations we've all shared is that when clients are doing blockchain projects, they're doing them together. Deloitte was on just a minute ago. They did some recent research that shows about 30% of the companies and execs they're polling are already in a consortium, and about over 50% are planning on joining one this year, and people are reporting they're going to spend millions of dollars on blockchain projects. So although we've been, if you listen to the press or some of the analysts, and look at maybe being in the trough of disillusionment, we're actually seeing a lot of really meaningful work being done. We're also seeing clients who struggle a lot to get these parties to come together. So wanted to share some of the insights and what seems to be working better as part of the discussion today. So I think I'll start with Manu. As you've been working with different business entities and coming together, they might have existing business relationships today around a certain process. They know those pain points in their industry, and they're thinking they really could improve significantly with decentralized technologies. What do you feel has emerged as maybe a set of best practices as you're thinking of forming a business network or consortium?
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. In some industries, the participants in the industries are competing so much between each other that usually they create their own system of record, and they see this as a competitive advantage. But at a certain point, in industries that are very interconnected, like global supply chain, global trade, for the cost of keeping this single system of record is really high. Regulations have increased, which means they are spending more and more time trying to create a correct ledger on their side, and there's a trend right now where all the competitors agree that it would be more cost-effective for the overall industry evolution to come together and have a shared ledger. And so now there's two options for them: is either agree to use a third-party provider that will be the repository of that ledger, which for most industries is not acceptable as a business risk, or to use blockchain to have a shared ledger or distributed ledger that no third party owns. And so that's why we're seeing a very significant trend in the adoption of blockchain in enterprise projects in this consortium, where they want to reduce their operational costs by having a shared ledger and then still retain their own privacy and access to the data.
Okay, Phil, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to build on that. So, I mean, I think we've seen some people have success by, getting together as a group of main industry participants, because as Manu said, people are starting to get the message that there's opportunity and, a need to do something. But, you can do that as a sort of looser affiliation, as, what people might think of as an industry association. Or you can do it in a harder form where you potentially invest in a new co. And that second option, it certainly has a lot of advantages, especially if it's a small enough group of industry participants that they can be pretty unified and agile and fast. Because there's definitely advantages in this market to being first to market. The standards will be established, and other players will likely come and join the consortium later. But that brings up another important point. You want to have a pretty unified group that can move quickly, but you want to be able to plan to add other participants later and get penetration. So some of these efforts that are much broader groups that are moving more slowly, they'll have more people on board when they eventually get launched, but they may be too late to the party to be successful in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Phil, and thanks, Manu. Just working with enterprises since 2015 in the blockchain space, there are some consortiums that formed where employees had one foot, obviously, in their current employer, and then one foot in the new blockchain project. And they end up spending years trying to get this to come together. And when they launched, it ended up being, 2 nodes, just, very limited. And some of that is just if you're building, your thing and you're inviting the other members to join what you've put together, it's a very different dynamic than coming together as equals where everyone feels they have joint ownership. So that the new co-model that Phil mentioned seems to be working pretty effectively. We saw a consortium of 15 major stakeholders in one particular industry, and sort of from different functional domains, but all around this use case. They incorporated in August, and then by December they were already in production with a letter of credit use case. So do you want to talk about that one,
Yeah,
Manu?
So that company is called Komgo, K-O-M-G-O. And the prime they're addressing is financing commodities. So for people not familiar with commodities, think oil, gas, minerals, cereals, grains being shipped from one part of the world to another part of the world. And so we're talking of very large amount of commodities being transacting, so tens of millions of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars going on a boat or a container. And it needs to be financed. And so the buyer and the seller agree on a term, but during the shipment, someone needs, the buyer will not pay until they receive the goods. And so that's where trade finance comes in. It's a highly complex, it's multi-party, highly complex. And in the case of Komgo, what they've built is try to bring that whole industry into the digital world. The challenge they had is, so far that industry is still operating pretty much on paper. The biggest revolution they had is email, but they never managed to fully digitize how they transact and issue letter of credits. And with Komgo, by bringing all the different parties, so the banks, the energy major, the traders, the certification houses onto the same network, they're now all able to have a common protocol, and that's very important, a common protocol to issue letter of credits and transact between each other. But they don't have to rescind the privacy they need around their documentation. They still are fully in control of the data and the transaction price and all the details, but the network and the common protocol allow them to do that peer-to-peer with a common language. And so there's massive efficiency gains that derive from that, something 20 to 50%.
So I think you mentioned the paper-based business process flows are inefficient, and clients and multiple consortiums are tackling that. I don't know, Pri, if you have something.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we can all agree governance is really hard. That's why there's, I think, several panels on governance here, but it's no different in a consortium either. There's IP rights that you have to map out, antitrust issues, and those are going to come up. And the only way to really manage those risks and map out these like rights and obligations are through legal agreements. And frankly, if you want to transfer these digital assets, you're going to need to wrap them in some sort of legal wrapping paper. And that's really where OpenLaw comes in. So we're actually a part of the Kaleido marketplace. The idea is you can spin up this legal paper, this commercial paper, mark it up, and transfer it between parties, sign, store, and execute a smart contract if you want one. So I think legal is a critical core structure to the blockchain stack, and on Kaleido, and for consortiums managing one another, and even Comgo with the letter of credit, there's always going to be something that brings parties together and to actually respect their obligations. So yes, critically important.
Okay, and have you seen sort of some insights around what's a better way to approach it versus some potential pitfalls to look out for when you're starting to look at using tools, capabilities like OpenLaw for your contracts and legal agreements?
Pitfalls? I mean, so I think, frankly, we solve for a lot of those pitfalls. So if you were to interact with a party with just simply a smart contract, which we all hopefully know here that it's really nothing lines of code, I mean, I think actually OpenLaw is kind of managing those pitfalls, if anything. So there's a lot of provisions of a contract that you can't necessarily codify. So you think of provisions like choice of law or force majeure. Those key provisions aren't ones you necessarily want to leave up to the courts or just through, discovery and going through your email history to figure out what exactly happened and what the parties agreed to. So that's why it's very, I mean, there's like, I think contracts are something that have existed since the time of the Sumerians, and that's one of the core, human elements. So the ability to contract in consortium is no different. So as far as pitfalls, I think we're actually kind of managing them and closing up any holes if there are any.
Yeah, so I think, OpenLaw is a great example of a component you need in this new business-to-business network compute stack. So as Manu mentioned, there's some consortiums we're working with that are really moving from paper-based and email to these new business networks. There's also clients who've been 10, 20, 30 years on these really antiquated systems, and they know they need to digitally transform. But they need the new system to integrate with their existing systems and sources of data. They have skills in the enterprise who need to be able to work with these as app developers. So how do you get that new B2B compute stack that helps you build these decentralized networks? And that's something, a ConsenSys, that we've been really working hard to build and pulling all the necessary components together to provide that full stack of capabilities. So I think that there's the legal and governance aspects of bringing the consortiums together. That's important to think about, and we've talked about it. The other one is the technology platform. So you're in a situation where everyone owns their piece of the network, but no one is going to own and control the whole network. So how do you do things as simple as onboard a new member? How do you grow and scale easily? How do you know the smart contract you think is running the network really is running the network? And that's all areas where technology can help. And the pulling together all the decentralized layers and important aspects of that in one place and delivered in more of a software as a service model is what enterprises are looking at, and I think has been the key to success of some of the consortiums and business networks that have been moving very quickly.
Yeah, because I was going to go back to your point from earlier about having building blocks, because we said earlier on that we have these models and we can think of ways to make the sort of organizational side of consortium building somewhat set up for success. But then there's just a ton of other stuff to do. I mean, you can decide the form of the consortium, but there's the detail of the actual governance outside of the legal agreements. Where you're going to have what kind of dispute resolution you're going to have, where you're going to give equity rights to new participants. So there's a lot to work out there organizationally and in terms of the business arrangements. And that's even before you've started on decisions like the solution decisions like roles and permissions, the product and platform, the network operations. So there's just a lot to do, and I think there's a natural role for both an outside third-party services provider that can mediate some of these discussions, that can bring best practice to the business side of things, and then also for building blocks, because there's a ton of stuff to do. So having a homogeneous layer for the actual network is, I think, a big help, especially when it provides some kind of flexibility and choice in the modular options. Any building blocks that we can bring, OpenLaw is another great example. All of that helps to speed up and de-risk and reduce the cost of building these.
Maybe, so looking back at the title, the conundrum, something interesting, when you try to build consortium, and it may mean different things for different people, but when effectively you try to bring together a group of entities that have often initially competing interest or diverging interest, for the consortium or for these stakeholders to agree to work together, you're going to need to find something that aligns their interest. And it could be in the form of, we're going to create a non-profit organization that's effectively going to be a utility company to us, and we're going to share that cost of creating a shared utility. And that's one model. Or you can decide for each of the company to invest and create a new company that's going to be a for-profit company, where some of their team going to go into that new company, going to have autonomy in decision of making that for-profit company live. And both of them will have some element of consortium, or will both rely on a shared ledger that can be powered by Kaleido. And to me, that would be a good... Another way to align interests is go quick to market. And so there's some groups that take the approach of trying to get 20, 50, 100, very large number of participants aligned, and then pilot, and then try to go to market. And often these take years and years and years and still don't go to market. The other approach is to take a much smaller group, find technology that enables you to pilot and go to market very quickly, and then you can iterate. Because if you're the first to market and you start demonstrating value, it's going to be much easier to bring other people into your network. And I think things like Kaleido make a fundamental difference. For Comgo, it allowed them to go live in just 4 months, something that used to take years before.
Yeah, and I think very easy to onboard major stakeholders and grow. And if you set up the network and you're going through various stages, you start with your major stakeholders, but have an eye to bringing that whole community in because they've built an open platform. I think it does raise, Phil, you mentioned risk, so I think we're all about de-risking what our clients are doing. You're building on these open source protocols, so if you go to talk to an IT analyst like Gardner, they'll say, these technologies are new, obviously there aren't many skills in the enterprise, they're managed and maintained by the open source community, and you have dozens of commits every day. Enterprise IT is not set up to handle that level of sort of churn. So by managing and helping at the protocol layer with all of the upgrades as versions change, while keeping the network in production is really critical to that software as a service approach. So the enterprise is connecting their systems to the APIs, but they're insulated from the risk at the lower layers and don't need to have those specialized skill sets around all the protocols. And of course, as things evolved and there's big upgrades, that's something they don't need to really worry about tripping them up. So.
Yeah, if any of you are approaching or starting consortiums or creating networks with a group of companies, and you start launching this network, one thing you're going to experience very quickly is the way we used to run IT before cloud. Cloud allowed for simplifying IT deployment, okay? And with blockchain, but the prime is it creates centralization of data which for many businesses is not acceptable. And here with solutions like Kaleido, you bring the operational simplicity of cloud deployment without having to give up your data to someone else. So I would highly encourage people to look at these options.
And actually, just on that note, so when you're thinking about development too, I think what we're seeing is this like emerging blockchain software stack. So you have Kaleido or Ethereum at the bottom here. And then second, this layer 2, so you'll have like custody, who's custodying these digital assets is going to be increasingly important. And then, I mean, a marketplace as well, like where can I buy and sell these digital assets? And then on one side, you also have identity and attestation, who owns these digital assets. And what really brings them together is also legal. And then from there, that layer 3 of this emerging token economy that everyone's really excited about, DAOs, RegTech, fractional ownership of real estate, art, all of that can really emerge. And I think once we get that layer 1, the layer 2, it'll be easy. And like the idea is to, you know, increase efficiencies in your build time so you can build faster.
Yeah. I was just going to add, someone told me recently that people say, you know, the technology's matured when people don't even realize blockchain is helping power the business benefits. And we're already seeing that in multiple instances. You know, customers who are downloading digital coupons on T-Mobile Tuesdays on their phone, and the really great marketing engagement rates on those campaigns, and they're using blockchain and they don't even realize it. So there's across various, you know, in production use cases, we're seeing that has gotten to the point where you can focus on the business value and not so much on just wiring the technology together.
So just to transition to another aspect of being successful in consortiums, and Manu, I think you'll have seen this in some of your experience. The actual construction of the organization is really important as well, because the benefit of having a newco is the ability to take decisions quickly and move fast. And to really achieve that, you need a strong, independent CEO, head of product, COO. Obviously, they'll take overall direction from a board made up of the main investors, but they can't be there to please everybody all the time, and they have to have a point of view and really clear KPIs and be able to push the agenda forward. And they also probably, especially if you're starting with a limited part of the industry and then pressing forward to try and get the network effect from recruiting new members, they need to be able to be funded to do things like marketing, to persuade people of the benefits, to continue to develop the roadmap, all things which sometimes get overlooked as different industry participants come together and form some kind of centralized group.
Okay, I think we're out of time, so I think just to summarize, in this new world with the consortiums and modern business networks, well, first of all, blockchain is something you're not going to get the benefit of doing it yourself. You're going to do it, it's a team sport, as some people in the industry like to say. And it's really companies shifting the mindset from producing a product or service that has the value to where the business network has the value. The business networks, the customer, the repeatable value is there. And thinking about the branding, thinking about the business and legal governance formation, as well as the technology choices, which are very different in that shared IT paradigm, are all really important. So thank you all for being here today. And we're available. I think there's a technical issue with asking questions, but we're available to answer any questions right afterwards when we get off the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.